The key features. First thing is it will use the cluster, and within the cluster we will allocate the memory, and it will use the distributed architecture, which is also called as Spark architecture. So which will distribute the data across different worker nodes and try to process the data, right? And it will do process the data in the memory. It's not store in the disk. It will do process in the memory itself, and it supports Python or PySpark and SQL, R language, and Scala. Apart from that, we can also interact with the Power BI to create the visualizations, and we can apply the role-based security to restrict the access to the different objects like notebooks, jobs, clusters, libraries, everything, etc. We can restrict the access. Also, we seen that we can create the visualizations within the Power BI itself, sorry, Databricks itself. But that is not our scope for the ETL. As a data engineer, you will never create the visualizations in the Databricks unless somebody asks you, right? So our goal is to transform the data, process the data, and store the data into the destination. That is what, right? So, so this is about this. So today, what we are going to discuss is like we seen like yesterday, like how to connect to our Databricks environment, like the trial accounts in both the ways how we can connect. So today we are going to discuss about that. The first thing is you have to go to the Google and just type in Databricks Community Edition. So after you type in, you can see you can go for the second one. First one is also fine. Just go for the second one, or first one is fine. Anything is this. So sign up for free edition. So if you have the Gmail account already logged in, just try to use that, or you can enter that email ID. Okay. I prefer to choose, like, since I already logged in using the Gmail, so I will just choose that and try to log in. Okay, we can use any email ID that valid, not only Gmail ID, we can also use Outlook or Yahoo, any kind of email ID, the valid email IDs are accepted. Since we are comfortable with the Gmail, so I'm just trying to log in with the Gmail. So just try to go select this, because how it is showed up, I already signed up with this account. In your case, you will be validating the Gmail ID through your mail ID, and that's it. Your Databricks environment is ready. No need of any credit card or anything is required. Just you should have the valid email ID, and you are able to immediately configure that Databricks workspace automatically, and you are able to start working on it, right? So this is about the first method of connecting to Databricks. But the limitations are, here you can see it is a standalone Databricks environment. For suppose if somebody asks you, okay, just try to pass something from the ADF environment, or just try to connect to your storage account or ADLS account and read the data from the file, or write the data into that particular storage account. So since we don't have access to other resources like data factory or blob storage or any other storages, any other things, so we are not able to store the data. So that is the drawback of this community edition. It is just for only just to explore the Python or PySpark capabilities using Databricks, as well as exploring the Databricks capabilities. Some of the out of the box things that we are not able to perform over here. Okay, I will show you like what are the major limitations comparing with the login through the Azure portal soon. Okay, so just to start with, after you log in, you can see these options, right? So here you can see workspace and catalog, jobs, compute, and if you are using SQL data warehouse, we can see like we can try to configure that SQL warehouse also, and we can try to use the SQL editor and write the queries, right? And then we can try to create the some you can create the dashboards also here, like so. Like this we can explore different features. Now, to start with, okay, so we discussed about the heart of this Databricks environment is a cluster, where you will create the cluster. The first thing is, if you want to do any development, you should be creating the cluster. So where do you create the cluster? If you go to this compute section, here you can see there is one cluster called as serverless. This is of type serverless. And the limitation is here, you can see there is no option to create a cluster. We are not seeing any option to create a cluster. There is no option like create, compute, something like that. So the limitation is you are not able to create the cluster in the Databricks Community Edition. By default, when you execute a notebook, the serverless cluster will be used. And here, one more limitation is you are not able to configure the serverless cluster. What is meant by configuration? You have to you want to choose like how many worker nodes are required, or how much memory is required. So you are not able to do it. It will automatically, based on the size of the data, it will automatically increase the worker nodes or allocate the memory on its own. So you do not provision, you don't have provision to configure that. Okay, so that we can do through Azure portal, but here we don't have that. That is one limitation. And second limitation is here, we are not able to store the files. That is one more limitation, right? We have a feature called as Databricks file system, DBFS. The short name is DBFS. We are not able to store the files within the Databricks file system. We don't have that feature here. That is disabled for some reason in the trial account, but we can do in the port through the portal. That is another one. Now, if you go to this workspace is automatically created. And if you go to this workspace, you have three folders: repos, shared, and the users. So we'll discuss about the shared. Shared means when you create any folder or notebooks like this, you write some PySpark things or something, right? So when you write kind of any program, and you want to share it, I mean, you want to give the access to all the users by default, so then go for using the shared folder. Try something creating in the shared folder, then that will be accessible to all the users. No need to give any permission to all the users or developers who are working in that project. And if you go to the users, you can see that users are created with the email ID that we have used. This is the email ID that we are using, and that is created with the that particular email ID. And within this, we can create a notebook or a folder. So now, for suppose you have created something over here, right? You have created something over here. For suppose um, folder one something. After you create the folder, by default, not every user will have the access because I am in my user, right? So I should go and externally I need to give the permission to some other required users. So that is the difference. It will be private to you. Any outside users, they cannot access this folder. That is the thing. And now, next thing is, if you look at this repos folder, okay, so we have the shared folders, users we know, and we have the repos. So what is this repos? And this repos is basically, if you have any Azure DevOps environment or GitHub, like you will be mapping that GitHub repository over here, and you will be storing your code, the notebooks, folders, everything into that particular Git folder. So this is the recommended approach. Why we need to use the GitHub or Azure DevOps to store the code? For suppose if you create something on the shared folder or users folder, if something happened to this Databricks environment, somebody hacked this Databricks environment, then what happened? It will basically complain about that you are not able to access anything. Then assume like you have kind of developers, right? Um, like who worked for 1 or 1.5 year. They did some decent amount of work and they forgot to store in the central repository. Then what happens? So all the efforts are gone waste, and it will be kind of unnecessarily like expenses for the client. So in that case, what we will do every time in the client environment, they will buy some GitHub or Azure DevOps license, and within that they will create some Git repository, and within that we will just map that repos over here, and we will do the development in that particular GitHub only. We always take the latest, and then we'll try to modify over there so that if something is happened to the Databricks environment, still we can restore to different Databricks environment. So that is a, I mean, suggested approach in the real time project while you are working in. So that will also follow like in all the projects, right? So this is very much important. So that is the difference between shared users and repos. The recommended approach use the GitHub or Azure DevOps to store our code, and then we can try to use that code to process the data, right? So that is about this workspace on high level. And recents, as we know, like recently what activity we have done, we have opened a notebook or folder or anything that will show up. Okay. And catalog, coming to the catalog. So if you just expand this workspace, you can see this is a default database is there, and there are some pre-existing system defined tables are there, information underscore schema database. Under that, we have some tables. So in a catalog section, you will be able to store the data in the form of tables, right? So here you can create the tables or delta tables. You will come to know what is delta table while we are discussing the database features. So we will be creating table or normal table or delta table, and then we'll try to store the data into them, and then we can access through Power BI, right? So until we store the data in the tables in the form of tables, we are not able to access through Power BI. That is why we'll finally store the data into the delta tables and all. That is about one thing. And second thing is we can see, for suppose if you go to the workspace, I have created, assume like I have created one folder, and if you go to the create, we can create the notebook. We can create the notebook. So this notebook, like we can just name it anything, right? So this is a notebook, and within this notebook, we can write our program. So for suppose I am just writing this. I'm writing this, and then something has been executed. But once you observe, when I trigger this command, when I run this command, what's happened? This cluster is becoming turn into green, mean that is active. For suppose if I terminate this one, if I terminate this one, and now if I execute again, first what it is doing, it is making this cluster active, and then it is executing this. until you don't access, I mean, you don't attach this cluster to the notebook. Just give me a minute. So until you attach this cluster to this notebook, we are not able to execute this any command. So by default, when you run this command, the cluster which is attached to this notebook will become active, and then only it will be able to run the command, right? So why it important? Because your command might extract hundreds of rows, thousands of rows. Where it will store? It will store in the cluster memory, right? So that is why, like, we need to make this cluster, it will always make this cluster active, and then it will try to execute it. Just a minute.
One question. So when we open the notebook, it will automatically active, or else we need to active every time the cluster.
So if you already using that cluster in other notebooks or some other things, like, you will be making that cluster active automatically. Then it will be staying there for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, it will be active.
Oh, first, if I am doing first time, then I need to
Then
be.
it will go and activate that cluster, and then it will go and execute your command,
Okay.
right?
So
So otherwise, hmm,
yeah, yeah. So this notebook is only for writing the queries, right?
correct. It is just like a editor where we will be using this notebook to execute our commands.
Okay, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
so within this notebook, if you observe, we can use, as I mentioned yesterday, we can use Python, SQL, Scala, and R, right? Python, SQL, Scala, and R language. But how? So this is by default. If you create one more cell, it is by default a Python cell. If you use, if you want to use some other language, okay, not within a single notebook, you are able to use SQL in one cell, Python in one cell. And if you want to use one more language also, that is possible, like you can use Scala. So in one cell, you will be able to use only one language, either Python, SQL, or Scala. But if you observed, if you want to use the Python as a default, so it is not making any difference. But if you want to use the SQL, so it is by default giving the command as percentile SQL, isn't it? It is giving as percentile SQL. Just 1 minute. So here it is changing from kind of to percentile SQL, means it is, we are able to write SQL commands like select star from table or blah blah blah, whatever the SQL commands that we can write. And Scala, if you know the Scala, you can also explore that. So the point here is, within a single notebook we can use multiple languages, depends on our requirement. But within a single cell we will be able to use only one language. And there are some user defined options that we can easily understand, like we can hide code, hide results, skip cell, right, or delete. So these are all user defined commands. So you can just cut cell means copy cell, delete cell, insert the cell, add the title means we can add the title over here, something like that. and then hide title, so we can hide it. So like this, some clear output or hide code or hide result. So these are all skip cell. So if you want to, for suppose you have written something and you want to skip it, you don't want to execute it, right? So in that case, we can just try to use percentage. By default, it is using percentage skip command. So it will not execute this cell. It will skip to execute that particular cell. So like this, while you explore, just try to select each and every output and see what is happening over there. And here also, if you go to the file as an option, so we can create a new notebook or we can import. Import means if you have any notebook in your local, you have done some development and you want to import into our Databricks environment, we can import, or we can export this. You have done something and you want to save it in your local, we can use export, right? So like this, we can use some default options over here and we can play with it, right? So this is about this notebook. And okay, you have done some development and you want to execute this notebook on daily basis. For that, you will require to go to this job section, jobs and pipeline section, where you will be creating the jobs. And within this, you can just call your notebook. Like this, you can just select as a notebook, and you can select the path of that particular notebook where it is stored. And then we can try to use this schedule and trigger section. We can just add it as scheduled, and then we can try to execute it, right? So that is how like we can use the jobs. And apart from that, we can also create some ETL flow within the Databricks environment. So these are all kind of new features like ingestion pipeline or ETL pipeline. So we can just try to create it here itself. So that will also explore, right? So that is about it. And then one more thing is here, we can also create a SQL based warehouse that has like we will store the data in the form of tables, and we can just try to go to the SQL editor, and then we can just try to write our own SQL, right? We can just try to write our own SQL, and we can store the queries that if we create any queries like stored procedures or views or anything that you can see over here. SQL editor is just to write your queries, and queries means you can see what are all the queries that you have saved. And dashboards, there are some additional capabilities that we really don't require, but if we want to explore, we can just create one dashboard same like the Power BI. We can just create it, right? So this is more about the higher level options that we can discuss like this. In data engineering also, you can access the jobs and pipeline section, and data ingestion also you can just try to access this ingestion pipeline options, right? So that is about this one. And now, okay, so since we already discussed about these features, now we will see like how to create our Azure portal account on high level, and then we will log in and see what is the difference. So in order to create your Azure free trial account, right? If you want to create your Azure free trial account, just try to type in Azure free trial and just click on Azure, try Azure for free. And then if you have any new mail ID, we can just try to use it. Okay. Or if you have already signed in, you can use that. Okay. So, um, in my case, I want to use some new mail ID. Okay, so the mail ID will be this, and I might send the code 910578. Yes, 658297. So for the first time, so just try to use that mail ID and all. Okay. I think I already did a sign off with this account. That is why it is creating some issue. But for you, just try to use the Gmail ID and click on sign up and try to give all the required details. Okay, it will open this page by default. Okay, for you, the steps that I performed earlier, it will not ask. Okay, if you are doing for the first time. Okay, so now it will directly take you to this personal details page, and then click on next. Once you click on next, so it will ask you to enter your personal detail, first name, last name, mail ID, phone number, right? Everything it will ask. Click on next, and then after you enter all your details, the final step is it will ask you to enter your credit card details, right? So why would they need it just for you are very serious about exploring this, and they want to restrict the some of the people like who do it for time pass. So that is why they will ask you to enter your credit card details. No need to worry, they will charge you only 2 rupees, and that too they will credit back after 2 working days. Okay, so if you have the credit card, that is fine. If you don't have it, so please borrow from your friends or relatives and you can create this. Okay, and they will credit like around USD 2000, means 14,000 rupees into your account, so you can use it within 30 days. After 30 days those will be expired and your account will be inactive. Again you have to follow the same process, and you have to create one more account. While creating that account, you have to change your mobile every time, change your email ID, and sometimes if you are doing from the same laptop also, it will not accept. In that case, even though you change your credit card, you change your phone number, you change your mail ID, just try to create it from different machine so that it will be acceptable. Okay, so these are other challenges. So that is why, like, I don't suggest you to create the Azure portal now. At least for first 15 days, it is not required. You can practice using Databricks Community Edition. Only for 2 to 3 sessions we require to use this Azure portal. Okay, otherwise we do not require to create this Azure portal. We can manage through free account. Okay, that is one thing. And second thing is, once you click on sign up, okay, so after you enter your the credentials will be saved automatically. So when you when you want to log in for the next time, you have to type in portal.azure.com, portal.azure.com. So once you type in like portal.azure.com, so it will redirect you to choose your default mail ID, that is this one, and you are able to log in, and just try to choose your mail ID. Just try to choose your mail ID here, and then you will be able to log in automatically without any issues, right? So this is second way of like we can create the Azure Databricks environment through Azure portal. Okay, so after you enter into this, what you should do? Okay, so that um, we'll discuss in the next class. Okay, that will require some amount of time. So I want to have a quick session today. So tomorrow we will see how to create our Databricks environment through Azure portal, and we can explore like how we can store the files in our local Databricks environment, and how we can configure our cluster and all we will discuss tomorrow. Okay, so for now, just try to, if you have the credit card you can just try, otherwise I don't suggest at this point of time. Okay, it is just for your knowledge, I am just trying to cover both the ways. Okay, so any queries on today's topic? So tomorrow we will have the class at the same time. Okay,